You're listening to Experience Imagination, a themed entertainment design podcast presented by Falcon's Creative Group. Every episode, we discuss a new topic with a panel of creative professionals. Hi, I'm Cecil McPurry, President and Chief Creative Officer of Falcons.
Welcome back to Experience Imagination. I am Abhinav Narayan, your host and moderator for the episode. As experienced designers and creative professionals, we all come from different backgrounds. And more than that, we all take inspiration from different sources. So while so many of us are staying as safe as possible at home during this pandemic, I am recording this from the floor of my closet, we thought this would be a great opportunity to reach out to some friends and colleagues and chat a bit about what has inspired us throughout our careers. We had the chance to jump on some quick one-on-one calls and geek out with several of these special guests from our studio and from the industry at large. So with that, let's jump into our call with our first guest.
My name is Patrick Riley. I'm the senior concept artist at Falcon's Creative Group.
So Patrick, as a concept artist, I would love to know what really speaks to you or inspires you when you see concept art. Is it color palette? Is it composition? Is it a bit of everything?
Probably just a little bit of everything. I look for artwork that has a unique style that isn't cookie cutter or something you see every day. And it may be in the way somebody draws a anatomy of a character. It might be just slightly stylized, or maybe the colors they use, or something may just be slightly, a little bit more fantastical than realistic. Just something that adds a little something extra to the image.
What kind of artists or particular styles out there have wowed you in the past?
One of my best influences is Frank Frazetta. I mean, I've been a big fan of his art for a long time, just because it's really hard to put a finger on it. He's got a slightly exaggerated anatomy that he adds to his characters, and also the colors of his paintings, which are very earth tony, but very unique at the same time. Other artists are Sid Mead, which is more in the concept art realm. Most people consider him to be like one of the innovators in concept art, and the same with Ralph McQuarrie, and even Disney-style artists like Glenn Keane, and comic book artists like Adam Hughes or Alex Ross, those type of characters. Even Mike Mignola, who's also, I believe, a Frank Frazetta fan. He's a big influence on me as well.
Was there a particular art style on a game or a movie or a story of any kind recently that really kind of blew you away?
A lot of the recent video games have really inspired me. Two of the major ones that stand out would be BioShock, mainly for its color and style and the mood that it sets for such a dark game. And the other one would be Uncharted. I just love the environments and the characters created for it. They just hit me in the right spot, and I just really enjoy the concept art in those type of games.
So, one thing I'm very curious about in relation to kind of your process as an artist is when you are starting on a new project or, a new story that we're working on, do you just start drawing whatever feels right? Or are you looking at reference imagery, or are you listening to like music or anything? How do you get into that space?
I always get inspired by projects that give me a lot of creative freedom. If I'm boxed in or something like that, it makes it a little bit harder for me to be creative. I like the stuff that has a lot of open interpretation for the artist. And depending on the storyline, that can also influence me and get me excited about a project. Knowing something like, for instance, the National Geographic stuff that we've done before, I really love working on those because I like, history and the science behind it and stuff like that. So that really kind of inspires me. And at the same time, I also like working on projects where I get to create cartoon characters and stuff like that, even though they give me like a basic background on the character, but I still have like some creative freedom on it. So I always expect the clients or, the directors at Falcons to give me some kind of direction, which is always exciting and great. And that's the kind of stuff that I actually prefer, which, I enjoy.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Pat. Really appreciate you coming on to talk to us.
No problem.
My name is Frank Weigand. I'm the president of TWT. We're a show ride engineering company.
Awesome. Experience design can mean a lot of different things and can be inspired by a lot of different areas. So one of my questions for you is, what has kind of inspired you the most into starting your career in engineering? Is there a particular work or experience that you encountered throughout your career that jump-started that passion for you?
When I was kind of a little kid, I always liked things that moved. Model trains, RC cars, all that kind of stuff. And I always enjoyed that. And I thought, well, how can I sort of leverage that and do something that is good for people? And so I kind of landed on the idea of mass transit. So after I got out of school, my first jobs were designing subway cars and trains, and even we actually set the world speed record for rail vehicles, which was a lot of fun.
Wow.
So I answered an ad in the paper for Disney, not knowing very much about it, and wound up getting a job in Imagineering, which was great. And in the themed entertainment aspect, being able to observe that the stuff that we design and build, whether it's an exhibit or a piece of art or some attraction, it changes people's lives for the better. And when I see a young boy or a girl interacting with some science exhibit, or seeing the proverbial light go on for them, or I watch a family stand in line for an hour for a 5-minute ride and they come out happy and excited and engaged, that's what's really inspiring for me.
Absolutely. I love the way that you said that one of the first things that inspired you was the way things move and how things move. I'm curious to know, was there a particular spectacle that you've witnessed throughout your career that kind of blew your mind and inspired you into rethinking what is possible when it comes to that kind of engineering or wonder through motion?
I worked on the Indiana Jones stunt show down in Florida, and I was responsible kind of for everything that moved. And if you've seen that show, there's an awful lot that moves. We had 20 different vendors working on the machinery, and we were under enormous schedule pressure because they had a tough time getting the script and the storyboard the way they wanted it. So we were way behind the curve on schedule. But what I remember was we were running our first, what they called a technical rehearsal for guests. And what that meant is it didn't really work well, and we weren't really ready, but they wanted people to see it. So during that first show, I was running around backstage just sweating gumdrops, trying to keep everything running and moving on cue. And it was very stressful. And then when the show ended, I heard this sound that I thought it was a broken airline. So there's this noise, and I was kind of panicky. And I came out from behind the sets, and I realized it was from the audience. And there was a standing ovation, and that was amazing. I mean, I'll never forget that. Even now, just recounting it for you, I still get chills up my spine.
That's amazing. Are there any people in particular that have inspired you in your journey?
Some of the creative people that I've dealt with, John Snoddy, Dave Cobb, Philip Vaughn, they willing to work with a technical team and leverage us so that the guest experience is the best it can be. And sometimes that means rethinking the vision a little bit, but that's a real treat for me.
This is a fantastic conversation. We're so grateful that you were able to join us today.
My pleasure, and thanks for thinking of me.
Absolutely.
Hello, my name is Ashley Prescott, and I'm an animator at Falcon's Creative Group.
So, Ashley, what inspires you most when looking at work in your field? What is the most inspiring thing about the world of animation to you?
For me, the most important thing would be the story. The story is absolutely like God for me. So if it doesn't have a good story, then I'm not interested. I really want to have like an emotional connection with that story, especially because for animated films in particular, these characters don't exist at all. So like I want to believe that I'm seeing a character that has feelings and thoughts, and I want to be super involved in like what they're thinking and feeling.
And I feel like that's the power of animation, right? It's such a visually expressive medium. That's like, I don't know, I would almost say that that's kind of like the lifeblood of the craft in a way.
I really think it is. Animation is all about expression through movement and just kind of like the illusion of life.
Yeah, the illusion of life. I like that.
It's a book written by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson.
In your work as an animator, what kind of things in a story jump out at you and kind of are like, oh, I'm going to really be able to play with that, or oh, that's really going to be a big animation moment? Like, what are you looking for as an animator yourself in the story that you will have to animate?
If it can make me cry, that's what I'm looking Or in a Pixar movie, you know, they have all those moments like the first 5 minutes of Up, everybody's crying during that. I really want to cry. And from an animator's like perspective, anytime I see something like that in a film, I'm just like, I want to animate a shot one day that completely tears somebody apart to the core, like something that speaks to someone on such an emotional level. And it's really cathartic for me. So any kind of story that has like a catharsis, which usually ends up with me crying, that's what I'm looking for.
Is there anything that you're looking at right now that's kind of really inspiring you and exciting you about animation?
The thing that's really like pushing the animation is I feel like when we went from 2D animation, you could literally do anything you could draw. And then moving into 3D animation, the animator is a little bit more limited by what the rig can do. As we're pushing the 3D technology, we can do a lot more with the rigs. The squash and stretch is really being pushed. But some animators would sculpt the model frame by frame to get like really a Warner Brothers like cartoony kind of feel. Versus like the same thing we kind of keep seeing over and over in Pixar films, but even they're starting to push it. So really what I'm kind of seeing is a return almost to 2D animation and the freedom it had. It's kind of coming back into 3D animation that's felt a little bit more limited. It's starting to feel a lot more free.
If anybody out there is listening who might be interested in animation in any way, is there a film or a show or a book even that you would recommend?
I would definitely say The Illusion of Life from Ollie Johnson and Frank Thomas. They were two animators who worked at Disney with the 9 old men, and they're basically the ones who created the 12 principles of animation. They did something called The Goddess of Spring right before they did Snow White. And it looks horrible. And so from that, they were about to make Snow White. Walt Disney was like, oh my God, this is like going to crash and burn. What can we do? They really started to study life. Like, how do people move? How do things work? So that's where the 12 principles of animation came from.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Ashley. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
My name is Cole NeSmith. I'm the founder and CEO of the Creative City Project, and we produce primarily a large-scale event in the heart of downtown Orlando across 10 city blocks every October. It's called Immerse, and it's a performing and interactive arts event where we platform more than 1,000 artists, and we're always working with artists to figure out how we can create experiences that audiences can't have anywhere else in the world, and usually encouraging our artists to figure out how they can build a really unique relationship with the audience.
What inspires you about a message or a theme or even an artistic medium when you're looking for your next project?
One of the things I love is that I, as an artist and the artists I work with, there's always kind of an intention, or there's always a message or something that we hope people walk away from the piece with. The thing that I've really grown to love the most are all of the unexpected surprises that happen when the audience starts interacting with the thing, whatever that might be. And the creative work always seems to come to life beyond our expectations. Sure, we might have the opportunity for people, or the intention for people to experience something around connection or conversation or community or some other random C word. But then they come back to us and they say, well, yeah, I experienced it in the way you wanted me to experience it. But there was also this thing where like I was afraid to do this or say this. And when I did it, I found this out about myself. And there's all these little really beautiful discoveries, and creating work that isn't just static, that isn't distant, but is invitational to the viewer.
Is there a particular artist or work of art that you encountered at any point during your time as an artist, during your career, that has really inspired you or that really blew your mind in terms of what was possible or what you could do? Is it a long list? Oh,
yeah. I remember buying my parents tickets to see La Nuba, which was the resident Cirque du Soleil show here in Orlando that ran for about 15 years.
Yeah.
And I had never seen it before, and I had never seen any Cirque du Soleil show before. And I left that theater with a new perception of what's possible from a live performance standpoint. And I was so inspired by the expertise of everyone on that stage to do what it was that they were there to do, but also how all of those individuals came together to create something exponentially more powerful than what any one of them could have ever made themselves.
Absolutely.
And I walked out of that as like an 18-year-old thinking the world is much bigger and there's so much more opportunity than I ever even conceptualized possible. I'll give you another moment that was really just like powerful for me. The first time I went and saw Sleep No More, the immersive theater production in New York by a company called Punch Drunk. It was just this immaculate world where everything was curated so well, from the way it looked to the sets and scenic elements to the caliber of performance to the soundtrack and the lighting and the haze in the air and the jazz band that played at the end of the night. Everything about it was such a visceral experience for me that I was like, I got to do that again.
Absolutely. We have a lot of listeners who I think are in the process of developing their craft or even discovering a new artistic pursuit that they might like. Is there any either general advice or a particular resource or work of art that you would draw people's attention to as kind of something to take inspiration from as they continue through their career?
I mean, I think it has to do with figuring out really what inspires you, because the things that inspire me, like Sleep No More, somebody else may not be all that inspired by. I think that for me has been one of the most valuable processes, has just been, what are the things that really bring me to life?
Yeah.
And so I think it's really just giving your space to explore a lot of things and then finding those things that really do kind of spark that creative life in you and finding more examples of that and keeping it going.
Absolutely. Yeah. Speaking of finding new sources of inspiration, Cole, I know you have a project of your own that I'm sure a lot of artists out there would find very interesting. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
I have a podcast as well that I actually think would be really pertinent to your listeners. It's called Artrepreneur, and it's designed to help creative people make creativity their career. So for artists or designers or dancers, really anybody with a creative dream, we talk about the mindset, the practicalities, the marketing aspect of what it means to bring our creative vision to life. People can find that on any podcasting platform.
Perfect. Cole, thank you so much for joining us. This was a great conversation, and we can't thank you enough for your time.
It's always an honor to spend time with the Falcons team. You all are amazing. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Joey Koval, Lovage, and I am a effects technical director at Falcon's Creative Group.
So in the world of effects, what inspires you the most when you're looking at work in that field?
So what inspires me most about effects really comes from looking at nature, more specifically like the randomness in nature, the details in fire, the lapping of water, or the billowing of smoke, and the math behind it of how that happens, how those reactions happen in natural real world phenomena.
Awesome. I totally get what you mean. Seeing the, I don't know, what is it called? The interference patterns that are out there in nature.
Different noise patterns. There's different types of noise, like curl noise, turbulent noise, anti-alias noise, and how they all act differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I personally was really awestruck by the movie Interstellar and how they achieved, obviously a wormhole is not something that we observe commonly in nature. Even a black hole is less accessible, but I know that movie has such an interesting history because a huge part of that movie was born out of a real scientific model of trying to visualize what a black hole could look like.
That's the coolest part about that specific scene, actually, is they did the actual math, sat down with scientists and engineers and figured out the actual math, and then plugged it into the computer and hit render. And when it came out, they actually thought it was wrong just because they looked at it like, well, that can't be right. But the more they looked into it, that's actually what it would look like, or what they speculated it would look like.
Yeah. So I know that you come from a background in films. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What kinds of experiences did you have working on effects? What surprised you the most about effects during that time of your career?
When I first started, I thought it was all going to be math, very technical, and it is very technical, but Some of the better effects artists have really honed in on being technical and artistic at the same time, and really allowing both drive their shots or their elements. Because at the end of the day, you still have to hit, what the director wants, and math may be the correct thing. It may be doing the physically correct thing, but it still has to be artistic and beautiful at the end of the day.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. What else has inspired you in your career?
Because of my interest in live events, and more specifically the lighting, like when you go to a concert, and I grew up playing guitar since I was 6 years old. So I love the music aspect of it, but there's nothing else that'll make the hairs stand up on my arms more than, seeing a good lighting show. It really ties the crowd into what's going on with the music.
And it has a similar, I think, application to whether it's an effect on stage or an effect in the media of, even if it's background, even if it's ambient, it just enriches the immersion and enriches the actual main story that's playing out in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
If there's anybody out there in the world of effects or interested in getting into the world of effects, is there a particular either story or work of art or even educational resource that really inspired you in your career that you would love to plug for other people?
I really think it comes down to experience and just getting out there and trying things and not being afraid to fail. I think I went through 4 or 5 internships before I really got in with a big studio, taking, and not to advocate doing jobs for free, because I think that's not good either. But just getting out there, learning, taking that first step, not being afraid to ask for help either. Nobody gets to where they're going on their own. I don't really think anything specific to look at for effects in general. Learning wise, there's so many different avenues you could explore.
Sure. Thank you so much, Joey, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Really interesting to hear your take.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Ron Hines. I am the Senior Vice President of Creative Development for Nickelodeon Experience Design, and that is a division of the newly formed Viacom CBS organization.
So, Ron, what have been some of your biggest inspirations early on in your career that have kind of led you to where you are now?
For sure, instructors, right? All the way from high school, undergrad, and then even in grad school. That's really people that pointed me in a sane direction. If you want to consider, a graduate degree in theater design a sane direction. But, I at one point in time thought I was going to be a performer, right? I really thought that's what was in store for me. But thank God in undergrad, you have to take the tech classes as part of a, BFA in performance. And somewhere in there, it just kind of dawned on me that, that work to me was so much more tangible. I could step back from design work or anything I'd done on the tech side, and I could kind of judge for myself, like that was successful. I like that about that, or I don't like that about that. And I'm never going to do that again. It was instructors that made me realize I had an interest I didn't even know I had.
Absolutely. As you were exploring the options for your career, was there a particular work or creation or experience that just really blew your mind and just shattered all of your expectations of what you thought was the path ahead for you?
I would probably have to say the first time I was able to go to, I was working for Universal, but I was able to make a side trip to the Netherlands, to De Efteling, which is a park there in Koval. And most folks in Europe will tell you, that's one of the, 3 or 4 parks you've got to see. But man, until you actually go there and see it, it's hard to put into words. The way in which it's all framed, right? It is so truly unique. They took their culture so deeply into consideration, and it resonates really deeply with that audience by knowing its audience, right? And that flipped a switch for me, you've got to know your audience, and really you need to kind of love your audience. The children's museums or science centers, all the way up to the big players, right here down the road from.
Have there been any creators or colleagues of yours throughout your journey that have inspired you along your way?
The one person I would probably just be completely remiss if I didn't give full-on props to would be John Paul Gertz, who I met through my work at Nickelodeon. I was a scenic artist. He was a production designer, and we both had theater backgrounds. And just in our first meeting, we kind of recognized a common lingo, out of the theater world. And he was the very first person in the industry to give me a chance beyond, what I was currently known as in my career. And he's still a very dear friend to this day. He taught me so much about the creativity and then the reality of it as well. From an industry global view, if you will. John Hench, right? I read he has it's a simple coffee table book, Designing Disney. Most folks are aware of this. So it's an easy read, right? It's like a 2-hour plane read. I mean, it's really good. It's just beautiful insights, but like the totality of it, what I took away from that book changed my own confidence and my own ability in career. The early part of my career, I was always a little intimidated by the visionaries in the room, right? I used to work for Cecil for quite a while, and I loved working for Cecil, but I was always a little intimidated by him because I don't have that visionary spirit. I just don't, right? And it's fine. Like, I know that about myself, and it's best that I know that about myself. But what I realized from studying that John Hench book and really thinking about that man and his career and what he did, that guy so clearly understood the importance of the vision and the dream, but he seemed to have this fantastic balance of understanding of the practicalities, the logistics, what it takes to realize that dream. It made me realize that what I did bring to the table, which was the ability to take anyone's vision and anyone's dream and grasp it fully and bring it to fruition, right? That's the value that I brought to the industry. And I think it's led to greater success for me as well.
Absolutely. So where do you go for inspiration for any particular project that might come about? Where do you go to kind of enrich or encourage those artistic sensibilities, that creative side?
The parks here in town, right? Where I'm super fortunate that I work in an industry that I actually love, right? And my family we're all very big park fans, and just observing, right? Just watching how people interact and engage with things. The simplest things you can do to draw people in. You put a big red button on a podium in the middle of a plaza, and you try to challenge someone to walk by and not want to press that button. That's very sort of metaphorical, I get it, but it's watching for where are those buttons, right? Where are those things that draw people in that they can't help but want to go interact with? Honestly, it's a matter of keeping your eyes open as you walk through your life, because that inspiration, that information is all out there every day.
Thank you so much, Ron. We really appreciate you joining us for this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, man. I'm happy to be a part of it, and I sure want to do anything I can to inspire other people to start down that path. You may not be able to see the end of it, but that's what makes it a fun path. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ron. Well, that does it for today's episode. We want to thank our guests for joining us from home and speaking with us. I also want to give a shout out to our podcast team, including our director of sound, Rick Morris, who is, as always, keeping our podcast sounding so great, even when we are all miles away from each other. While so many of us are at home, we'd like to invite you to share with us who or what has inspired you in your career. A movie or filmmaker, an artist or an attraction, a book, a play, a theme park land, anything. We want to hear about it. So you can find our podcast posts on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn and leave a comment with what has inspired you. I know I will be finding the LinkedIn post to leave a comment about the one story that has most inspired me in my passion for writing and storytelling. As always, if you have any questions or comments or ideas for future episodes, please don't hesitate to reach out and email us at podcast@falconscreativegroup.com. Again, that's podcast@falconscreativegroup.com. And last, we just want to reiterate that we hope you all can continue to stay safe and comfortable as much as possible wherever you may be during these times. And with that, we'll see you in the next episode.
This has been Experience Imagination. For more information about this episode's discussion, be sure to visit our blog at falconscreativegroup.com. And don't forget to follow Falcons Creative Group on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.